This video is brought to you by Sailrite. In this video, we'll be showing you how to install a zippered window opening in an enclosure curtain panel. This zipper opening will include a removable zippered screen, so you can remove the screen completely to give better visibility and better airflow. With the zipper screen removed, you can also roll down the vinyl window material, zip it closed, and fasten it at the bottom. With this type of window opening, if you need some air and you don't want those pesky insects to enter your enclosure, you can reinstall the screen and snap it at the bottom. We'll show you every detail from start to finish how to install this type of zipper opening with removable zippered screen. This type of vinyl window opening offers all possible options available for a zippered window opening. Screen up, vinyl down, screen and vinyl up, or none up. The only negative aspect of this window is that the bottom edge needs to be refastened down when making changes to the window combination. This video is a small excerpt taken from the Enclosure DVD. The Enclosure DVD will soon be available from Sailrite at the end of 2012. A detailed material list will be found at the end of this video. Let's get started and show you how it's done. We're going to place some marks on our vinyl window material curtain where we want the opening for the zipper to stop. Here we're going to come down a few inches from the bimini, and we're going to make sure that it is horizontal to the bimini, so we're using a Sharpie marker to mark on the vinyl window material a few places. Along the bottom edge of our curtain, we're marking where we want the sides of the window opening to stop, and we're being sure that they're approximately 3 inches away from any type of fastener. Keeping away from a fastener will make it easy to install the bindings and the zippers in a future step. Once it's marked in a few spots, remove the curtain and take it to your sewing table. We're placing a long ruler along the top edge where we wanted the top of the window to stop. Then we're going to take a T-square and come down vertically right where we place those marks along the bottom edge. Then we'll take our Sharpie marker and mark up to the top line. We'll do that on the opposite side as well. After marking the top edge, now we have the exact dimensions and size of our window opening. Next, we'll be basting and sewing a binding along the two vertical sides of our window opening. The binding will stop approximately an inch down from the upper line that we marked because a facing will cover it in a later step. So no reason to go all the way to the top, just so that it covers about a ½ inch inside the edge of the 2-inch facing. We'll be cutting 2 strips of a 3/4 inch bias binding that will be placed on both sides of our window opening. We're cutting it to size, just a little bit longer than it needs to be by about a ½ inch or an inch. Now we're using 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas and applying it to the back side of the bias binding. We'll be applying the binding to the outside surface of our curtain panel. We're applying it about an inch down from that upper line, almost directly on top of the vertical line that we struck down with a Sharpie marker. The second strip will also go right beside this to the outside of that line. These bindings are not directly side by side. You want about a fingernail space between the two bindings because we will be slitting the window material between these two bindings in a later step. Follow that exact same procedure for the opposite side. Now we'll use the Sailrite edge hot knife and we'll trim the excess binding that hangs over the bottom edge. Just flush with that bottom edge of the 2-inch facing. We'll be using the Sailrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine. This is a straight stitch only sewing machine, great for canvas and upholstery. And we're only going to sew the inside edge of these 2 bindings. We are not going to sew the outside edges. Those outside edges will be sewn later on when we sew the zippers in place. When you get to the top of the curtain panel, there's no need to reverse here because a 2-inch facing will cover this location in a later step. You can see Deb scrolling the material to get it to fit underneath the arm of the Sailrite Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine. That's normal. Even for a long arm sewing machine, that's necessary. Though a longer arm sewing machine makes it easier, it can still be done with a portable machine like this. Here at the bottom edge, you should reverse to lock the stitch in place. Again, it's not necessary at the top. Then follow that exact same procedure for the opposite side. We will not show this whole process here. For your information, we're using a Helios thread, much like Tanara thread. The Helios and Tanara thread are a lifetime guaranteed thread. You could use a V92 polyester, which is UV resistant, but will rot over several years. We will now baste a 2-inch sunbrella facing to the top edge, and we're using a hot knife to seal the ends of the 2-inch facing. Here we're using that white soapstone pencil here to mark where we want to cut that, and we're cutting on top of a metal ruler that prevents damage to the tabletop. Now we're applying the 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas to both edges of this 2-inch sunbrella facing. You could also use a vinyl facing like Stamoid for this entire process as well. Sailrite sells a Stamoid 2-inch facing and a 3/4 inch bias binding made from Stamoid. Next, we'll be installing coil zippers. To do that, we need to turn the enclosure curtain to the inside surface. So the bindings that we installed earlier are on the underside. The YKK coil zipper does not need to extend all the way to the top portion of our 2-inch facing. It can be mounted in the middle of that. Then cut the coil zipper with scissors along the bottom edge, right at the bottom edge of our 2-inch facing. On the bottom side of those coil zippers, we'll next install a 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas. The 1/4 inch basting tape is smaller than the 3/8 to keep the glue away from the teeth, and you need to apply it as close to the edge as possible, keeping the glue, again, away from those teeth. Once the transfer paper is removed, the glue is exposed, and we're going to stick it here to the top. This is midway between that 2-inch facing, and we're going to follow the edges of the binding on the underside of the vinyl window material. Pull the transfer paper off as you stick the coil zipper down, all the way down to the bottom edge. All right, there's the top edge. Moving on, we'll do the same thing to the other side. Exact same procedure. Deb's using the Sailrite edge hot knife and cutting the 3/4 inch bias binding to approximately 3 inches in length. She'll need about 8 strips of these because we'll be using these for zipper stops in all of our applications. We'll be installing 4 zippers, 8 stops are required. Now we're going to sew that coil zipper down using the Ultrafeed LS1 sewing machine, and we do not need to sew into the 2-inch facing, so we just started right along the edge of the 2-inch facing, reversing a little bit at the beginning and the end. Keep your stitch close to the edge of this zipper flange, that way you catch the edge of the binding on the opposite side. Do not sew the opposite side of the zipper down, only this side. When you get to the 2-inch facing, stop sewing, and then pull the zippers apart, and we're going to be using that binding that we cut earlier as a stop at the bottom. Deb will wrap the zipper with 3 layers of this binding. I, however, would not do that. What I would do is I'd do a U, which would, the bottom of the U would encase the teeth, and the 2 edges would just come to the edge. Doing it the way Deb is doing it is multiple layers of sunbrella with the 2-inch facing, with the vinyl. It's just a super thick application. It does work with the Ultrafeed sewing machine, no problem, but I would rather just go through 2 layers of the binding rather than the 3 layers of the binding. Be sure to reverse to secure that well at the end, and then we'll move on. Okay, here Deb's applying basting tape to that binding so she can hold it in place, and this is the opposite zipper. Remember, we do not want to sew the other side of the zipper. That'll be done in a later step. So we're just repeating this process, but we're starting at the bottom edge of our curtain panel rather than the top edge, so that's why she's installing that prior to sewing, because she's just flipped the panel around so that there's not as much fabric that has to go through the throat of the sewing machine. And because that binding is so thick, she had to start off the binding and then reverse into it. Again, I would just do 2 layers rather than 3, and then all that multiple thickness as well. Sew all the way to the top, but do not sew into the 2-inch facing. Stop right at the edge of the 2-inch facing and reverse to lock your stitch in place. And we're done with that. To finish the top edge, first we're going to create a roll-up strap, and we're going to use a 1-inch polyester webbing for that, so we're using the Sailrite edge hot knife to seal the ends. Then we're going to find the center of our window. Our window is small enough that we can use 1 roll-up strap. We're going to mark that location, then we're going to put a piece of double-sided tape at that location to hold the webbing in place. You could use vinyl window material in lieu of the webbing. The vinyl window material will be more invisible when it's hanging down. That's your choice. We're going to baste the roll-up strap in place. It's obviously longer than it need be. And then we're going to move on to our Velcro. We're going to have Velcro running across the top, and we're going to apply the 3/8" basting tape to the 2 edges, the underside of the Velcro. Before you put that on, be sure to put your sliders in place. These are the number 10 coil sliders that will be installed onto our coil zipper. And you need to start the fat end on first. Once they're in position, then you can finish the top. Do that to both sides. We're using a single pole slider for our window panel. You could use a double pole slider, which may be something you may want to consider because you may want to get to it from both sides of the window. We've applied the basting tape to this looped Velcro. This is a 2-inch Velcro, and now we're basting it right over top of the zippers, directly over top of that 2-inch sunbrella facing that we applied on the opposite side. And this is the inside surface of our curtain panel. We'll now take it to the sewing machine and we'll sew down both long edges of that 2-inch Velcro. That'll secure the Velcro on this side, and it will also secure the 2-inch facing on the opposite side. Be sure to do a little bit of reversing over top of the zipper teeth. Do that carefully so that you do not get a needle deflection issue. At the webbing, you want to do a little bit of reversing as well to secure the webbing, or you may have used the vinyl window material as your roll-up strap. Just do some reversing over that as well. And here at the opposite end, reverse over the zipper teeth a little bit, securing those in place. And then sew along the top edge, reversing at the beginning and the end. And now you're done. Now if you take a look at the bottom side, you'll see the 2 rows of stitches securing that 2-inch facing in place. We're going to be using a Fibertex material for the screen. The Fibertex material will definitely block out the mosquitoes and allow for good airflow. You could use the fiberglass mesh if you're concerned about no-see-ums. We'll be using a silver Sharpie marker. You can use anything that marks the fabric so you can see your marks. And we're going to place a line directly in between the 2 bindings, the 3/4-inch bindings. This is right in the center of them. All the way down the sides. And as we're showing here, we're doing it at the bottom edge of our curtain panel. And this bottom edge is not straight. It has a little bit of a curve to it. That will typically be the case. So we're just marking where the bottom edge is, and then we're doing the opposite side, right between the 3/4-inch bindings, right in the middle of them, all the way up to the 2-inch facing at the top. And we're marking that location as well, though we are going to want to go above that, so we're going to mark a line above that as well. So our screen material is now the exact size of our window opening. Now we'll just cut it out with scissors. We'll now be finishing the screen edges. First, we're going to install a 2-inch facing. Again, we're using Sunbrella, and we're going to use a Sailrite edge hot knife to seal the edges of it. This is along the bottom edge of the screen. This is not the top edge. So take note of that. We're going to use 2 strips that are exactly the same length. We're going to apply the 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas to the bottom side of these 2-inch facings, peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and then we'll baste it along that bottom edge. There is a slight curve in this edge, so try to follow the curve to the best of your ability. The 2-inch facing does take a curve, but it won't take a really sharp curve. Now we'll apply the second strip of 2-inch facing to the opposite side of the screen. And if it's a little bit long, we'll cut it short with the hot knife to seal the edges. Then we'll sew it in place, reversing at the beginning and the end of our stitches to lock your stitches in place. We'll sew the inside edge, reverse here at the end, and then we'll sew the outside edge, reversing at the beginning, and obviously when we come to the other end. Alright, the bottom edge is done. Because this screen panel has shape, it may not fit if it's facing the wrong direction. So Deb has placed it on top of the vinyl window material to determine that it is fitting exactly. That way she'll know which side she needs to install the 3/4 inch bias binding to. So this is the correct side, so the underside is the side where the binding is installed on this screen. She's going to flip the panel so she can work on that side, and then she's going to apply the double-sided tape, the 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas, to the bottom side of the 3/4 inch bias binding. Peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and then we'll baste the binding directly along that edge.
And again, I'm going to leave it down about 1 inch because that's where our 2-inch facing is going to come across.
This is the top edge of our screen. No reason to go all the way to the top. We'll stay down about 1 inch. We'll do that to this side, and we'll also do that to the opposite side. We'll use a hot knife to cut the edge right along that bottom edge of the 2-inch facing. Okay, now do that same thing to the opposite side.
Okay, and ditto.
Here at the top, there's no reason to use a hot knife because a 2-inch facing will cover this location. We will only sew the outside edge. Do not sew the inside edge. That will be done in a later step when we install the zippers. So do that to this side, all the way through the 2-inch facing, reversing to lock your stitch in place. And then do that to the opposite side. We will not show all of this. We'll now concentrate on the facing at the top of the screen.
You're going to want to measure it from the piece on the glass.
Wanted to take measurements from the piece on our curtain because the ends are a little bit longer. Deb's going to explain that now.
As you can see, the screen's only the size to here, and you want this to come out the full length. So we want to make sure that our facing is the same width as the one on the glass.
So measure the length of the facing so that it's equal to the facing that is installed on the curtain.
This can be hot knifed after you cut it off. Sometimes it's easier to cut your length. So
we'll also want to cut our Velcro hook the same length as that facing we just cut. This is a 2-inch Velcro hook.
Facing.
We'll now rotate the curtain around so we can gain access to the top, but before we do that, we need to line the screen up directly over top of our opening. So this is the bottom edge, and we're going to clip it with little office clips to keep it from moving. So we're matching it up to the bottom edge of our curtain panel, and then we clip it with these office clips that you can get at any box store. Next, we'll apply the 3/8 inch basting tape for canvas to both the 2-inch facing and also the 2-inch Velcro. Be sure the screen is facing with the binding down.
Put this to the top. and it will hang over.
We'll place the 2-inch facing on the top, whether it be Sunbrella or Stamoid, both available from Sailrite. Peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and we'll baste it in place. Be sure that the edge of the facing is matching the edge of the facing that's already installed on the curtain panel, and that the facing extends to cover the Velcro. Once the facing is secure, we'll roll the screen over and we'll apply the 2-inch hook Velcro to this side, just as we did previously with the facing, directly over top of the facing. As you can see, this Velcro covers the binding and makes it look finished. Now we'll take it over to the sewing machine and we'll sew a straight stitch down both long edges, reversing at the beginning here and also when we get to the other end to lock our stitch in place. Alright, let's move on. Next, we'll be installing the YKK Vislon zippers to both the screen and also our curtain panel. This must be a finished zipper because the screen will be removable, so make sure you order a finished Vislon zipper.
The screen, this is so to the zipper. La, la, la. At the top,
Let's rotate this panel a little bit so you can see this
put it
better.
up to where your gap's just the width of that.
We've chosen to use a single pull slider, and you notice the slider is facing up.
Walk.
Deb's walking the zipper down, and then she's going to mark it with the soapstone
And
pencil
we'll mark
where
it
she
right
wants
about
to
where
cut
the
it.
stitch is. So we're going to have to cut our zipper off. And we're going to wrap it with another tab there. Since we're cutting
We're going to
off.
use the Sailrite edge hot knife and cut those zippers to size. Instead of using the binding as a stop, we could just take 2 teeth out of the excess zipper, cut those, and push them into the zipper, and then melt them in place. Other videos show that process. It's your choice.
Okay, and I prefer that this go to the window and the slider goes on the screen. That way when you remove your screen, you've got this slider with you and it's not hanging on the window. Okay, now you notice when we unzip this one, in order for the zipper to go on there right, the slide would be down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I want this over here, so I'm going to take this off all the way to the end, like so, and take it off. And I'm going to put it back on the opposite way. Locking slide, just like that. Voila, we're on the right side.
We're using a locking slider, which means the slider puller has to be pulled for the slider to move up and down. It is quite acceptable to use a non-locking slider for this application, so that's your choice. We've installed the 1/4-inch basting tape for canvas on the zipper flange as far away from the teeth as possible on the underside, and now we're positioning the starter box right up against the 2-inch facing and basting the zipper onto the side of our screen. The edge of the screen is split between the teeth, so the teeth are just poking over the edge slightly, all the way to the bottom side.
Cut it off a little more.
There's no reason that the zipper has to go this far, so we'll cut a few teeth out so that it actually doesn't go all the way to the edge at the bottom. Then we're going to use that 3/4-inch binding, and we're going to use that as a stop. Again, Deb does 3 layers. I typically just do 2 layers, a U, with the bottom of the U curve covering the teeth. You could also just cut out 2 extra teeth and sink the teeth into the zipper and then melt those 2 teeth in place and use that as a stop. However, the binding creates more of a finished look. We'll now repeat that entire process to the opposite side as well. We are not going to show this whole process because you've already done it. Now we'll take it over to the sewing machine and we'll start sewing directly underneath that 2-inch facing, and we'll sew the zipper in place. Make sure the stitch is close to the flange, the edge of the flange I should say, of the zipper. Notice that Deb buried her needle, lifted her foot, moves the slider past the foot, lowers the foot, and continues to sew so that she doesn't run into that zipper slider. But keep the stitch close to the edge so that it catches the binding on the back side. Here at the bottom edge, reverse over the top of that binding that is used as a zipper stop. And we'll do the same thing to the opposite end. Here we're starting at the bottom portion and working our way to the top. We will not show this whole process since we've already done it. Let's take a look at the back side to show you that we've caught the binding now on the inside as well as the outside. Next, we'll take the opposite half of the zipper and we'll install that to our curtain. So here we're using those binding strips to create a stop again. And we're going to use the 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas on the underside of our zipper. Peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and we'll baste that directly on top of that coil zipper that we installed previously. We want the zipper to be approximately 1/8 inch down from the Velcro. We are matching up the edge of the flange to the flange of the coil zipper. The coil zipper has not yet been sewn down, so when we sew this Vislon zipper down, the coil zipper will be sewn at the same time. Before we sew it down, Deb's going to use that binding to create a stop here. Again, she does 3 layers. I would just do 2.
Alright, we're going to take both of those, wrap them together. And you got to make sure that your end is going to come around. So when that you stitch through here, it's going to grab onto the bottom here.
Whether you like it or not, you can see that the binding does give it a finished appearance, but it doesn't have to wrap around 3 times because it's just awful thick. Now we'll take this over to the sewing machine and we'll sew this zipper down. We're starting at the bottom edge, and we'll be sure to reverse here to lock this in place, and also hold that binding as a stop, and sew down the length. When you get to the slider, leave your needle buried, lift your foot, move the slider, lower the foot, continue to sew. This sews in both the coil side of the zipper and the Vislon side of the zipper. Here at the top, you'll see that that starter post is about 1/8 inch down from the Velcro, and do some reversing there as well. Do that same procedure to the opposite side. We will not show that whole process. Here's what it looks like on the outside surface.
Go ahead and unzip those.
Now separate those zippers by pulling the sliders all the way to the top, and now we're going to cut or slit the vinyl window material. Roll the curtain over so the outside surface is facing up, and then we're going to take shears and cut through the bottom edge of our facing and also the vinyl window material.
Your zippers apart here on the bottom.
Make sure you don't cut through the zippers. That's why we unzipped them earlier.
You don't want to cut your zipper and have to replace them. Okay, and then you can just run your scissors.
You can stay about 1 inch down from the upper facing. It doesn't have to cut all the way up to it.
Actually, you don't need to go all the way up because your slide's going to stop anyway, and that'll just keep it sealed.
Alright, the only thing to do next is to install a fastener for our roll-up strap, and we're going to use the press and snap tool to do this. We've installed a stud and an eyelet in the press and snap tool, and now we're going to roll the material so we can get underneath the throat of the press and snap tool. That's the only negative thing about the press and snap tool. It is hard to get it inside of a lot of fabric. So if you have to put a snap in the middle of a big canvas piece or upholstery piece, you'll find it difficult to use the press and snap tool for that because there's not much throat space. You may want to consider the Sailrite system from Sailrite instead of the press and snap tool. But the press and snap tool does put snaps in nicely. It punches the hole and set the snap all at the same time by just depressing the lever. Now we're changing the dies so that we can install a socket and a button. We'll install a button to this side of the press and snap tool, and we'll install a socket to the opposite side. They will not fall out of the tool.
Oh, we're gonna roll this outside.
The length of the strap is totally determined upon your preference. We're going to roll it fairly tight here so we can determine what length we want this strap to be. Again, we're using webbing. You could use a vinyl window material as a strap as well. If you use a vinyl window material, you need to use a hot knife to cut the material. You can just use scissors. It is still recommended that you fold the material over to go through at least 2 layers of fabric when installing the fastener. Alright, now that we have that snap installed, we just need to cut the excess of the webbing away, which Deb just did there with the hot knife.
Unroll it. Flip it.
Now Deb's going to flip it around so you can see how the screen zips in place.
Slides down the window.
Now let's show you how it works. We're going to install the
Slide
screen.
Here. Slide it right on that skirt or two. Zip there.
Zipped one side of the screen in place. Now let's zip the other side of the screen in place. Now let's go zip this curtain to the boat. We also need to install fasteners along the gunnel. That's where we need to install the fasteners for our particular application. So let's do that next. Since there are 2 layers of fabric that need to be fastened to the gunnel, we're going to use the gypsy snap. However, a common sense fastener with a double stud can also be used. Along the aft curtain, there are already installed some one-way snap fasteners. These one-way snap fasteners will not work with our application, so we're going to drill them out. Because our snaps have a hole in the center, you can just drill through the hole, and that will eventually come down to the barrel, and the snap can easily be removed. If you don't have a hole in the top of your button, you'll have to drill through the socket as shown here to remove the snap. We'll also be removing the stud, which is a one-way fastener stud as well, and replace it with a standard stud. Take note that butyl tape was used to install this fastener, and it works beautifully to seal out the elements. We're going to reapply the butyl tape to this new stud and then reinstall them along the gunnel of the boat. Butyl tape will be squeezed out when the snap is fully installed, and taking a wad of butyl tape will clean it up beautifully. We highly recommend butyl tape as a bedding compound. To install our snap fasteners, we're going to use a Sailrite system available from Sailrite. First, we'll install the stud die onto a standard riveting tool. We'll be using the Sailrite Gypsy stud, and then we'll insert the Sailrite Gypsy stud into the Sailrite stud die. Next, a Sailrite mandrel will be inserted into the Sailrite socket die. Then a snap socket will be installed on top of the Sailrite socket die. Our application calls for a hard action socket. That's what we're using. The SnapRite socket die is now snapped over the stud that is pre-installed onto the boat. We'll roll up the window here so that this window does not get in the way as we install the snap into our screen. The location of the snap is easily determined by pushing the mandrel through the canvas at the exact location that you want the snap to be installed. Then take the riveting tool with the SnapRite stud die and the gypsy stud installed and depress the lever until the fastener is securely set into the canvas. The mandrel does not necessarily need to break. Once the snap is securely in place, just pull the riveting tool off and then pull the die off the back side and then snap your fastener over the stud. Now we have a socket with the gypsy stud on the outside. One of the great features of the SnapRite system is that you can position the canvas directly over the fastener that you wish to install into the canvas. Now just simply push the mandrel through the canvas, and then if you're not happy, you can pull the mandrel out of the fabric and re-punch it into the fabric in a different location. So before you install the fastener, you're assured that you're going to have the fastener exactly where you want it to be using the SnapRite system. Now we'll follow that same procedure using our riveting tool with the SnapRite stud die installed and the gypsy stud installed into the die. We'll depress the lever until the fastener is securely in position in the canvas. That's all that's required to use the SnapRite system with a SnapRite gypsy stud. If you like the SnapRite system, you can order it as a complete unit. Here's the part number for that. Next, we'll lower the window and install a socket and a button. Utilizing that same SnapRite system, we'll install the button die to the standard riveting tool. Now we'll install a SnapRite button inside of that die. Now using the SnapRite socket die, we'll press a hard action socket to the die. Then insert a SnapRite mandrel into that die. At the boat, we'll lift the vinyl window material, revealing the screen, and then snap the die to the gypsy stud. The vinyl window material curtain already has a hole from having to remove the one-way snap previously. We'll push the mandrel through that hole, then use the riveting tool with the button die installed and the SnapRite button in that die, and then depress the lever until the button and the socket are firmly set in the canvas edge. With the SnapRite system by Sailrite, you can put a snap anywhere on the material surface. There's no throat restriction. One-step installation with a mandrel creates a hole, so a pre-punctured hole is not required. You can also install snaps on site. There's no need to move canvas to a solid workbench like when using those snap fastener installation tools that require a hammer. The SnapRite system works with common household pop rivet guns. The 4 dies of the SnapRite system do it all. They work with dot snaps, pull the dot, gypsy studs, stainless steel snaps, and other snap brands that are in the line 24 size. All snap parts are held securely in the tool during installation. Accurate positioning of snaps is assured as the die snaps onto the stud for perfect positioning. Next, we'll use the SnapRite system to install pull the dot snaps. Along the outside edge of our zippered panel, we're going to use the pull the dot snap or a one-way snap. The one-way snap socket has a special locking finger that only allows the snap to be unsnapped in one direction. There's no need for a special die. We'll use that same SnapRite socket die and place the pull the dot one-way snap socket on top of it. With the SnapRite mandrel pushed into the die, we'll go to the boat and snap that die onto the stud already installed on the boat. Because this is a pull the dot or one-way snap, the protrusion must be pointing down when positioning the die over the stud. Now just push the mandrel through the canvas in the appropriate spot and check one more time that the protrusion is facing down. Now insert a SnapRite button into the SnapRite button die with it screwed onto a riveting tool, and then just position that over the mandrel and depress the lever until the fastener is securely set in the canvas. The Sailrite mandrel is made from stainless steel and does not necessarily need to break, though if you choose to break the mandrel, you can depress the lever until that happens if you like. Now, our fastener is installed. Because we've chosen to use the pull the dot snap or a one-way snap, you'll notice here as we unsnap the snap at the bottom, it easily comes up, but along the top and the sides, it does not release. There are a whole host of other tools that can be used to install snap fasteners. We were just demonstrating in this video the use of the Sailrite system available from Sailrite. Now that our project is complete, let's show in double time some of the many combinations in which this window opening can be utilized. Here you can see both the vinyl and the screen up. Now Angela is removing the screen, then she'll use this top snapper tool to snap the bottom of the vinyl window panel. Now she unsnaps the vinyl window panel, rolls it up and snaps it with the roll-up strap. Now she'll reinstall the screen via the Velcro and the zippers on the side, and then snap it at the bottom again with the top snapper tool. As you can see, this type of window opening is very versatile. As promised, here's the materials list. You may want to pause the video to study these two lists. To construct a window like this with a removable screen, the average cost for the materials is around $68 for the average window. Be sure to check out Sailrite's other videos at the Sailrite website or subscribe to the Sailrite YouTube channel today. This has been a small excerpt from the Enclosure DVD that's coming soon to Sailrite in 2012. I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. Thanks for watching this video. Bye-bye. It's your loyal patronage to Sailrite that makes these free videos possible. Thanks for your support.